So on the Marine Corps side, they're in the midst of this big overhaul of the force. It's called Force Design 2030, started by the current Commandant General Berger, and really looking at taking the Marines from a land warfare-centric force to something that can be much more agile in islands and beaches and really optimize themselves for a potential fight in the Pacific, but also be applicable to other places. You think the Baltic Sea, you think the Mediterranean, other bodies of water, where you could have some island hopping, some beach warfare. And this has really made them rethink about what they need to buy going forward, moving away from heavy things like tanks that are hard to transport, and really leaning in on unmanned systems that can gather targeting data, unmanned systems that can launch anti-ship missiles. So General Berger really got the Marine Corps off on a good path, but this is meant to be an iterative process. So the next Commandant of the Marine Corps is really going to take the progress of the past 4 years and have to continue innovating going forward. What are going to be the latest and greatest in loitering munitions? What's going to be the latest and greatest in command and control, not just stitching together spread out Marine Corps forces, but pulling in naval vessels, pulling in Air Force aircraft, really bringing the Marine Corps to a prominent role in the joint force. And so to do that, we're looking at a lot of upgrades on the command and control side. I really think that's where we're going to see the biggest effort and the biggest focus area for the next commandant, but also considering, not just how can we gather data for the rest of the force, but in the cases where the Marines are the only ones on hand, how can they, complete the kill web, right? So looking at getting into the anti-ship missile game, looking at even getting into anti-submarine warfare potentially. So I think there's some really interesting problem sets that the Marine Corps will be facing in the next 4 years. And the next commandant is really, I think, probably going to have a lot of fun kind of grappling with some of these bigger issues. So speaking of the joint force, Stephen, you have covered General C.Q. Brown for the past couple of years in his role as the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. He's already been nominated to serve as the next chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And some of what he's previously spoken about with his vision for the Air Force really lends itself to an idea of how he may approach leading the joint force. What have you heard from him in the past?
So I mentioned his Accelerate, Change, or Lose effort. That's something that is trying to overhaul the structure of the Air Force and the makeup of the aircraft and other components of the Air Force, and to get it ready for a conflict in the Pacific region. And part of that has to do with increasing the amount of interoperability between various weapon systems. The Air Force is working on a thing called ABMS, the Advanced Battle Management System, that tries to tie together a lot of these aircraft and other systems so they can better track targets, better share data more accurately, more swiftly, hone in on where a fighter or bomber needs to strike and share that data. That's going to come in handy to a great degree in a potential war in the Indo-PACOM region, and it would also make it easier for the Air Force and Air Force aircraft to talk to other services, work together with other services. And General Brown's vision was essentially endorsed by President Biden in the ceremony where he announced the nomination of General Brown to be the next chairman of the Joint Chiefs. President Biden mentioned Accelerate, Change, or Lose and said, "General, you're right on." So you can count on that being essentially marching orders from the commander-in-chief on how all the services will need to operate in a conflict going forward.
Well, that's all we have time for today. Thanks to Stephen and Jen for joining me today to talk about these topics.
Thank you.
We'll be tracking all these stories as they develop over the year. For Defense News, I'm Megan Eckstein.